Good evening from Castle Buildings at Stormont outside Belfast on the day of a truly momentous agreement, promising a fundamental change in the political relationship between North and South and between Britain and Ireland. An agreement that unites loyalist and Republican, unionist and nationalist, finally emerged after 2 years of talks and decades of violence and bloodshed. From first thing this morning to the final moments before the deal was secured, the mood here at Stormont veered almost by the hour between confidence that a deal was tantalisingly close to fears that these talks, even as the finish line loomed into sight, could still stumble. The end, when it came quickly as the final pieces were put in place.
As midnight came, the DUP marked the deadline for the talks with a protest. Around 300 supporters of the Reverend Ian Paisley, who has consistently opposed an agreement, broke into the grounds of Stormont and assembled at the Carson statue. They were met by a line of RUC members in riot gear. Later, they attempted to advance on Castle Buildings, but were blocked again by the police. A few hours later, inside the talks complex, the SDLP were literally jumping with joy, following a successful meeting with the Ulster Unionists, which paved the way for agreement on how a Northern Ireland Assembly and a representative executive would be formed. 6.5 hours after the formal deadline for an agreement had passed, the Alliance Party leader was in an upbeat mood.
We didn't get it by 12. We have been working through the night and we haven't quite got the deal yet, but I think we can have reasonable confidence that we will do that.
We have made some important progress. There's other very important issues that we have to secure before we could go back to our party or our constituency. But we, as I say, we give this commitment. We'll work right up until the very last second.
The smaller parties too were exuberant, expecting the long hours of negotiations were about to draw to a conclusion. For some loyalists, it was an emotional time.
It's been a hard slog.
Very emotional moment.
Yes.
And how do you think the prisoners in the maze and the people of Northern Ireland are going to feel about this deal?
The people of Northern Ireland, including the prisoners, will be absolutely delighted.
Former UVF member Gusty Spence, now a member of the PUP's talks team, was also backing a deal.
I know you speak a few words of Irish, so I've heard. And will tú sásta?
Well, I tell you, my phrasing has gone to hell, you know. Don't push your luck.
As a new dawn broke, the SDLP leader John Hume received a telephone call from President Clinton, stressing his commitment to the peace process and indicating he might return here before the referendum in May.
He was expressing his strong hope and goodwill that we would reach agreement today, and was also making very clear that he would offer us any assistance that we asked for or required, particularly in the economic field.
So, over the next few hours, the world was left to wonder whether this could be the start of a new era in Northern Ireland. Michael Fisher, RTE News, Stormont.
Dawn broke at Stormont with the deadline for agreement well past and the chances of a deal emerging seemingly slim. However, within hours, what had been only dreams of a settlement began to edge towards the realms of possibility as the main players emerged into daylight, now clearly in a more positive mood.
Well, my view is that we have made some important progress. There's other very important issues that we have to secure before we could go back to our party or our constituency. But we, as I say, we give this commitment. We'll work right up until the very last second.
As the morning progressed and the omens remained good, there was a growing feeling of anticipation and celebration amongst delegates in the media as the conviction grew that they were witnessing history in the making. The Stormont talks, though, have witnessed many a false dawn in the past, and another appeared on the horizon when the Taoiseach and Prime Minister Tony Blair failed to appear for a press conference called to mark a successful conclusion. And it wasn't long before the portents of doom began to appear.
Well, I think there's been no plenary call for a start, so we would have to say that the process is in danger. My understanding is that the Prime Minister has already met with them, so I would think it would be serious enough if that's happening. But all we can do is wait and see what decision that they make.
The potentially disastrous problem transpired to be unionist unhappiness over decommissioning, and their internal party wrangle ended with the abrupt departure of one of their leading negotiators, Geoffrey Donaldson. Uncertainty thereafter was followed with the legendary unpredictability of the Stormont talks, with the almost immediate convening of the long-awaited plenary session, and finally, agreement. Brendan Wright, RTE News at Stormont.
As the politicians emerged from castle buildings, there was a tangible sense of emotion, a tangible sense of relief. Exhausted as they were, they immediately delivered their own interpretation of the agreement. For David Trimble, despite Jeffrey Donaldson's exit, claiming he could not morally support the agreement, the union was more secure than ever.
We rise from this table knowing that the union is stronger than it was when we sat down. We know that the fundamental act of union is there intact.
For one of the main architects of this process, many challenges lie ahead.
That fundamental to resolving this problem is agreement. And agreement threatens no section of our people, but challenges both sections of our people and their public representatives in particular to come forward with new thinking.
A view echoed by the Sinn Féin leader, Gerry Adams.
That's the way Nationalists and Republicans will come to this. They'll come to it sceptically, but I think hopefully, and they will ask themselves, could it be a new beginning? Could it be a false dawn? And what we in political leadership have to do is to manage all of that, be measured and try and move forward.
It's about recognising the need to encompass all attitudes and all opinions, all religions, all creeds, all colours, sexes, disabilities, within a diverse and honourable society, that which my society has never been.
For a relieved chairman of the talk, Senator George Mitchell, a belief that the parties will sort out whatever difficulties arise.
They showed the leadership today in approving it, and I think they'll show the leadership in selling it. Sure, there's going to be disagreement, there's going to be dissent. That's in the nature of democracy. But I think when people understand what's at stake, they won't want to go back to what they've had over the past 30 years.
Senator Mitchell now goes back to his home in the US. All the participants here would agree, a job well done. Michael O'Kane, RTE News, Stormont.
As the icy wind whipped around the Shankill Road, there was no obvious euphoria on the streets or sense that the nightmare was over. Just caution, some bitterness and perhaps a measure of hope. Will you vote for an agreement?
No, it's not. We're so down forever.
I suppose if peace comes at the end of the day, that's what you want really, like, isn't it? Well, it's questionable, you know. I'd have to sort of think about it a little bit. You know, I wouldn't want too much of the South involvement, you know, in the affairs of Northern Ireland.
And what about Sinn Féin participating in a power-sharing cabinet or committee?
Give Sinn Féin to get their guns back first. Put our weapons. Simple as that.
In nationalist West Belfast, the headlines spoke of a deal being done, but whatever the suspicion, it was clear trust was being vested in the representatives of nationalism.
As long as there is equality for everybody, and that union's getting their own way, as it's always done.
If Gerry Adams is happy enough, I'd be happy enough.
If there was an assembly and so on that guarantees the right of unionists to stay part of the United Kingdom, would you be happy to sign up to that?
Well, if those people want to be that way, that's okay, as long as they live that there's equality, that we're part of Ireland, and that we stay in there, and it is Ireland too, no matter why they're in the United Kingdom or not.
Perhaps as a sign of what the future may hold, apprentice boys at Balnafie called off a planned march through the nationalist Lower Ormeau on Easter Monday. Residents there welcomed the move.
I think everybody should take a lead from the talks process and sit down and find a long-term resolution to the marching issue through dialogue. The marching issue could be used to destroy the peace process.
The Malone Road, where middle-class life sometimes seems a million miles from the conflict, outside St Bridget's Catholic Church, the sense of history was perhaps slowly creeping in.
We're delighted to see this day coming. You know, it's just really hard to believe that the parties have got together and some sort of agreement. So we're obviously delighted.
We have children, and it's great. Couldn't say how pleased we are. Thank God.
These youngsters in the city centre have never known real peace.
You know, there's only so much you can do. If them people agree, if the politicians agree in peace, then it's not going to say that everyone else in Northern Ireland will agree in peace.
But they might yet just lose that youthful pessimism and, as they grow older, enjoy the fruits of a normal society. Tony Connolly, RTE News, Belfast.
The two Prime Ministers emerged just before 6 this evening to inaugurate the historic agreement they hope will usher in a new era for the island. There was praise for the Taoiseach and for the parties from Tony Blair, who paid tribute to all who had lost their lives in the conflict, suggesting that the nature of today's deal would change relationships in Northern Ireland forever.
The principle of consent is absolute and is throughout the agreement. And the breakthrough is that is now accepted by all, North and South. Also, those who believe in a united Ireland can make that case now by persuasion, not violence or threats.
A view echoed by the Taoiseach.
My ultimate political aspiration remains the coming together of all the people of Ireland, achieved peacefully and by consent. I value deeply the close relationship between the Irish government and the British government. But I look forward equally to a new era of friendship and reconciliation between Unionists and Nationalists, in which each tradition can learn truly the value of the other.
The last 4 days have been among the most difficult of Bertie Ahern's life. Inside the Talks complex there was praise and sympathy.
Thank you for all you did. It's a very difficult week, very difficult stage.
And everywhere there was joy and congratulations, and also relief that a critical and difficult set of negotiations were at an end. There were farewells for the main participants and others less directly involved, and a universal feeling that it couldn't have happened without the commitment of Senator George Mitchell and the persistence of others. David Davenpower, RTE News, Stormont.
At Dublin Airport to welcome the Taoiseach were members of the Cabinet as well as his brother Maurice. I asked Mr Ahern for his thoughts as he brought this historic agreement home to Dublin.
The nice thing about today, I think, was the fact that all the parties, the chairman, the governments, all were in favour of the agreement, all were prepared to sell the agreement. Nobody was asking them, nobody was dragging them. They were all totally out there pushing this deal. And that is, I think, because we succeeded in doing what we've been trying to do, to make it comprehensive and to make it balanced, to make it fair.
It still looked quite dodgy at times, even until the early hours of this morning. What was the psychological turning point when you knew it was definitely on?
When we had to tie down the institutional issues. We had to make sure that the Assembly in the North had both UUP and SDLP support. And if you take it that these parties have not been talking for many years and have not really cooperated for a long way back, that they agreed that document with the assistance of the government, but without intervention from the government directly. That was a major step. The second thing was when today, when we got near the wire, like all of these issues, when it became clear that if we really had change, if we had power sharing, and when we got people to agree to that, of course people got nervous about that. Then people said, well, is it real? But in the end of the day, people said, yes, it is real, and we're going to have a go at it.
Are you convinced that the paramilitaries on both sides will actually now undertake decommissioning?
Well, what the Prime Minister has underwritten is that they will start the process. The process could take some time. But without mentioning names, when you're in these direct discussions for hours on end and nights on end, and since last Tuesday week, effectively, I've been closeted with these people in one form or another. You hear what their real inner feelings are, and I'm heartened to say that if we make progress, if we change, none of the parties, including those who would have been paramilitaries in the past, they want to see change and they want to move on.
The Taoiseach also said he hoped to hold the referenda on the agreement towards the end of May so that elections for the Northern Ireland Assembly could take place in June. Una Claffey, RTE News, Dublin Airport.